For uncounted millennia, the Zorgan hegemony had reigned over the galaxy. Thousands of star systems and countless sentient species toiled under the yoke of the Zorgan elite. Dissent was crushed without mercy. Autonomy was a dream of the distant past. The hegemony endured, unchanging and unyielding. On the fringes of Zorgan space, a lone yellow star shone upon its system of worlds. The species of the third planet, calling themselves humans, had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Still struggling to establish a handful of colonies, they barely registered as a footnote in the hegemony's records. But the humans of Earth had watched the stars with growing unease. The history of the Zorgan conquest was writ large across the heavens, a dire warning of the fate that awaited any civilization that dared to emerge onto the galactic stage. Emissaries sent by the humans to the hegemony's subject worlds returned with harrowing tales of oppression and despair. In the halls of power on Earth, a grim consensus emerged. Humanity's only hope was to prepare for the inevitable. When the Zorgan fleet finally reached their world, they had to be ready to fight for their freedom, or perish like so many before them. Under a shroud of utmost secrecy, the combined nations of Earth poured their resources into a desperate project, the construction of a warship that could challenge Zorgan supremacy. Knowing they could never match the hegemony's numbers, they staked everything on a bold gambit. Quality over quantity, a single vessel to turn the tide. In hidden shipyards, teams of Earth's brightest minds labored to bring the audacious vision to life. Advances in propulsion, weaponry, and shielding were developed at a relentless pace and integrated into a design that rewrote the rules of war. The result was a dagger aimed at the heart of the complacent hegemony, a starship built expressly to sow chaos and disruption across Zorgan space. The Prometheus. As the Prometheus neared completion in its concealed orbital dock, word of the project began to leak despite the best efforts of Earth's intelligence agencies. In the hegemony's corridors of power, a few reports of suspicious human activity registered as a minor curiosity, nothing more. The Zorgan leadership, confident in their unassailable dominion, dismissed the scattered intelligence as unworthy of attention. Little did they realize that the course of galactic history was about to turn on the actions of a single human vessel and her crew. The era of the Zorgan hegemony's undisputed rule was drawing to a close, and the age of humanity's defiance was about to begin. In a blaze of fusion fire, the Prometheus emerged from its hidden orbital dock. Dwarfed by the engineering marvels that flecked Earth's sphere, the ship nevertheless had a deadly elegance to its design, an amalgam of flowing lines and angled planes that spoke to its singular purpose. At the helm sat Captain Nora Ixila, her face set in determined lines. She had been a child when first contact with the galactic community had revealed the oppressive reach of the Zorgan hegemony. The daughter of a diplomat and an aerospace engineer, Ixila had grown up steeped in tales of both the wonders and horrors that lay beyond Earth's skies. All stations report ready, came the voice of her executive officer, Commander Terran Singh. Ixila scanned the bridge, meeting the eyes of each member of her handpicked crew. They represented the apex of human courage and ingenuity, each the best in their field, united in unflinching resolve. "Helm, take us out," Ixila ordered. "Let's show the galaxy what humanity is made of." With a surge of acceleration, the Prometheus leaped into the endless night. The ship's advanced dark matter reactor allowed it to outpace even the swiftest Zorgan cruisers, while its hull, forged of a revolutionary nanowave alloy, could absorb impacts that would reduce conventional vessels to glowing slag. But the true marvel lay in the Prometheus armaments. Banks of railguns firing hypervelocity rounds at relativistic speeds, swarms of drone fighters equipped with AI-honed targeting systems, and the crown jewel, a spinal-mounted particle lance capable of slicing through the reinforced heart of a Zorgan dreadnought. As the Prometheus pierced the veil of Zorgan space, a sense of grim purpose permeated the ship. They were a lone wolf in a forest of enemies, far from support or reinforcement. Their mission was one of disruption, to strike at critical choke points of the hegemony's military-industrial complex and sow chaos in their wake. Their first target was a Zorgan fleet depot, where a portion of the hegemony's naval might lay anchored for retrofit and refueling. The Prometheus fell upon the unsuspecting station like lightning. Railgun rounds tore through hulls and turned dropships into brief, blossoming fireballs. The particle lance swept across the depot's vast berths, leaving shattered ruins in its wake. In a matter of minutes, a key link in the hegemony supply chain was reduced to a drifting field of wreckage. Similar scenes played out as the Prometheus struck at target after target. A deuterium refinery vital for Zorgan fusion reactors, a shipyard ringed with half-complete battlecruisers, a comms relay that left an entire sector cut off from the hegemony's orders. Yet even as the ship darted from system to system, its crew knew their luck could not hold forever. Upon a nameless moon, an alert Zorgan commander caught a glimpse of the Prometheus as it raised a supply depot. Racing to their communicator, the commander sent out a top-priority alert across the entire hegemony battlenet. A human warship was rampaging through their space, leaving destruction in its path. The hegemony, so long unchallenged, found itself facing an attack from the most unexpected of sources. As reports of the Prometheus actions spread, the Zorgan leadership convened an emergency session. The order went out. The human ship was to be hunted down and destroyed at any cost. The full might of the hegemony would be brought to bear. But even as the Zorgan fleets began to mobilize, whispers of the Prometheus' successes were already spreading among the oppressed peoples of the galaxy. A seed of defiance had been planted, and it would soon blossom into the flames of open rebellion. The Prometheus' string of devastating attacks sent shockwaves through the hegemony's leadership. The notion that a single ship, crewed by a previously discounted species, could wreak such havoc was inconceivable to the Zorgan commanders. Their complacency gave way to mounting alarm as reports of the Prometheus actions continued to flood in. In the Grand Zorgan War Room, a vast holographic star map dominated the chamber. Red icons blossomed across the display, each marking a site of the Prometheus handiwork. The gathered Zorgan Admiralty watched in disbelief as their empire's vulnerabilities were laid bare. "This cannot be allowed to continue," growled Admiral Zaxxon, the most senior of the assembled officers. "Dispatch the 7th Fleet to Sector 29 Alpha. They are to find this human ship and eliminate it." Similar orders echoed across the hegemony as the Zorgan military machine creaked into action. Battle groups were diverted from their patrol routes, elite hunter-killer squadrons were roused from their bases, and even the hegemony's vaunted Omega destroyers, immense vessels bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten glass, were brought to full readiness. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Ixla watched the tactical display with a grim satisfaction. Every red flash signified a successful strike against the hegemony, another chink in their seemingly impenetrable armor. But she knew their window of opportunity was closing fast. It was only a matter of time before the full weight of the Zorgan fleet was brought to bear against them. "Captain, I'm picking up increased chatter on the Zorgan comms network," reported Lina Sarova, the ship's communications officer. "They're mobilizing a significant portion of their fleet to hunt us down." Ixila nodded, her jaw set. "Then we'd best make ourselves scarce. Helm, set a course for the Kyrian Nebula. Let's see if we can't shake our pursuit in that stellar soup." As the Prometheus swept through Zorgan space, the disruption left in its wake began to have broader consequences. On a dozen worlds, the sudden absence of Zorgan patrols and supply ships was noted by the oppressed populations. Whispers began to circulate of a lone human vessel that dared to defy the hegemony's might. In the dark corners of spaceports and in the backrooms of resistance cells, the legend of the Prometheus grew. The idea that the seemingly invincible hegemony could be vulnerable, that their rule was not a foregone conclusion, kindled a spark of hope among the downtrodden species of the galaxy. Sensing the shift in the galactic winds, Captain Ixla made a daring decision. In the brief lulls between strikes, the Prometheus began to reach out to known resistance groups. offering tactical data and promises of support should they rise against their Zorgan oppressors. In the shipyards of Zorgan-occupied Thaxia Prime, enslaved engineers began to subtly sabotage the vessels they were forced to repair. On the mining world of Koldar II, workers organized clandestine unions and prepared for a general strike. And on a dozen other planets, resistance fighters stockpiled weapons and planned for the day of their uprising. The hegemony, so focused on destroying the Prometheus, failed to notice the groundswell of rebellion brewing under their feet. The human ship had become a catalyst, a symbol of defiance that was awakening a long-dormant thirst for freedom across the stars. As the Prometheus ducked and weaved through the Zorgan fleets hunting it, the shape of a larger conflict was beginning to emerge. What had begun as a lone act of human defiance was on the cusp of evolving into a full-scale revolution. The question was, could the Prometheus survive long enough to see the fruits of its labors? Across the vast expanse of Zorgan space, the flames of rebellion began to catch and spread. Inspired by the audacious actions of the Prometheus, long subjugated species rose up against their oppressors. On Thaxia Prime, the sabotaged Zorgan ships faltered as they left their berths, falling prey to the vengeful weapons of the rebels. The shipyards became a microcosm of the spreading chaos, with pockets of Zorgan troops fighting desperate battles against the tide of revolution. The scene was mirrored on 100 worlds, miners laying down their tools and taking up arms, slave soldiers turning their guns on their former masters, spies and saboteurs striking at key Zorgan infrastructure. 1,000 pinpricks of defiance, united by the symbol of the Prometheus, threatened to bleed the hegemony dry. The Zorgan response was as swift as it was brutal. Orbital bombardments reduced rebellious cities to ash. Entire populations were rounded up for mass executions. The hegemony's dreaded enforcer legions, long held in reserve for just such a crisis, were unleashed upon the galaxy. In the midst of this firestorm, the Prometheus continued its campaign of strategic strikes. Captain Ixla and her crew knew that their ship had become more than just a military asset. It was an idea, a beacon of hope in the darkness of Zorgan tyranny. As news of each Prometheus victory spread through the rebel networks, weary fighters took heart. The sight of the sleek human ship slicing through the void, always one step ahead of the Zorgan hunters, became a rallying point, a promise that the hegemony could be defeated. But even the Prometheus could not evade the Zorgan net forever. In the Kyrian Nebula, a trio of Zorgan Omega destroyers managed to box in the human ship. The nebula's swirling gases interfered with sensors and communications, turning the engagement into a deadly game of blind man's bluff. On the Prometheus bridge, red lights flashed as warning klaxons blared. The ship shuddered under the impact of near misses, the Zorgan destroyers closing in for the kill. "Shields at 30%, shouted Singh over the din of battle. "Rear armor is buckling." Ixila gritted her teeth, her mind racing. The Prometheus was powerful, but even it could not go toe-to-toe with 3 Omega destroyers simultaneously. "Lena, anything on comms?" she asked, hoping against hope for an advantage. Sorova shook her head, then paused, pressing a hand to her earpiece. "Wait, I'm picking up a transmission. It's faint, but it's a rebel frequency." Ixila's heart leaped. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life. "Prometheus, this is the Free Faction Navy. We've got your back. Hold tight." Mere moments later, a volley of high-yield torpedoes erupted from the nebula's depths, slamming into the flanks of the Zorgan destroyers. As the behemoths reeled, a flotilla of ramshackle ships emerged from the stellar fog, rebel craft, cobbled together from stolen Zorgan tech and refitted civilian haulers. It was a ragtag assembly, but in that moment, it was the most beautiful sight Ixila had ever seen. The rebel ships swarmed the destroyers, drawing their fire and buying precious time for the Prometheus to disengage and slip away. Though the rebel ships paid a heavy price, with many consigned to the void, their sacrifice was not in vain. The Prometheus had survived to fight another day, and the legend of its indomitable spirit would only grow. In the aftermath of the Nebula battle, whispers reached the Prometheus of a gathering storm. Multiple rebel factions were uniting, pooling their resources, and coordinating their actions. The ad hoc revolution was coalescing into something more, a true alliance set on breaking the hegemony's grip once and for all. And at the center of it all was the Prometheus, the ship that had started the fire, the symbol of what could be achieved when the oppressed dared to stand up and fight. In a distant star system, far from the prying eyes of Zorgan patrols, the rebel fleet gathered. Ships of 100 designs and a dozen species floated in formation, united by a common purpose. At the heart of the assemblage, the Prometheus gleamed like a polished blade, ready for the final plunge. On the Prometheus bridge, Captain Ixla surveyed the rebel armada on the viewscreen. It was a force unlike any the galaxy had seen in millennia, a union of the dispossessed and the defiant, bound by the shared dream of a future free from Zorgan tyranny. As Ixla prepared to address the fleet, she couldn't help but reflect on the long road that had led them here. The Prometheus had been forged as a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to save humanity from the hegemony's inexorable advance. But in the crucible of battle, it had become something more, a catalyst for a galaxy-wide uprising. "This is Captain Ixla to all ships," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today, we stand on the edge of history. Today, we strike a blow for freedom that will echo across the stars. The Zorgan hegemony believes itself invincible, but they have yet to face the full might of a united galaxy. Let us show them the error of their ways." A chorus of cheers and alien war cries echoed over the comms as the rebel fleet prepared for the jump to Zorgan Prime, the heart of the hegemony. It was a risky move. The Zorgan home system was the most heavily defended site in the known universe, but it was also the only way to truly end the cycle of oppression. As the fleet emerged from hyperspace on the fringes of Zorgan Prime, they were immediately met by a wall of hostile contacts. The massed ranks of the hegemony's grand fleet, the pride of the Zorgan war machine, stood arrayed against them, a phalanx of gleaming warships stretching as far as sensors could detect. The battle was joined in a storm of lancing energy beams and cascading missile salvos. The rebel ships, though outmatched in sheer firepower, fought with a desperate ferocity born of centuries of oppression. Zorgan cruisers were swarmed by nimble rebel fighters, their hulls breached by suicidal ramming attacks. Mighty dreadnoughts exchanged broadsides with stolen hegemony frigates, the void alight with the funeral pyres of ships on both sides. At the forefront of the rebel line, the Prometheus danced a deadly ballet, its advanced weaponry carving a path of destruction through the Zorgan ranks. The human ship was a rallying point, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos of battle. But even the Prometheus could not hold back the tide alone. Slowly, inexorably, the weight of Zorgan numbers began to tell. Rebel ships fell by the score, consigned to the cold embrace of the void. On the Prometheus bridge, warning lights flashed red as damage reports flooded in. The ship's shields were failing, its armor pitted and scarred from countless impacts. Captain Ixla shared a grim look with her executive officer. They both knew what had to be done. The Prometheus had one final card to play, a secret weapon that could turn the tide, but at a terrible cost. "Initiate the Ragnarok protocol," Ixla ordered, her voice heavy with finality. "Broadcast to all rebel ships. Disengage and withdraw to minimum safe distance." As the Prometheus surged towards the heart of the Zorgan line, its hull began to glow with an ominous light. In the bowels of the ship, a complex array of dark matter reactors spun up to critical mass, their containment fields straining at the edges. The Zorgan ships, sensing the threat, poured fire into the Prometheus, desperate to stop it before it was too late. But it was a futile effort. The human ship, burning from stem to stern, was now more than a mere vessel. It had become a spear, a blazing lance aimed at the heart of Zorgan power. In a flash of blinding light, the Prometheus detonated, its dark matter core unleashing a cataclysmic blast that tore through the fabric of space-time itself. Zorgan ships were vaporized by the dozens, their hulls atomized by the unimaginable energies unleashed. The shockwaves spread out in a rolling tsunami of destruction, shattering the Grand Fleet's formation and leaving only drifting wreckage in its wake. In the stunned silence that followed, the rebel ships regrouped, their sensors straining to penetrate the maelstrom of residual energy. Of the Prometheus, there was no sign. But even as they mourned the loss of the brave human crew, the rebels knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The Zorgon fleet was in ruins, its aura of invincibility shattered beyond repair. The road ahead was still long and fraught with peril, but for the first time in millennia, the end of Zorgon tyranny was in sight. The Prometheus, and the valiant humans who crewed her, had lit the spark. Now, it was up to the rest of the galaxy to fan the flames of freedom. In the aftermath of the Battle of Zorgon Prime, the galaxy held its breath. The Prometheus' sacrificial charge had broken the back of the hegemony's military might, but the apparatus of oppression, honed over millennia, would not crumble overnight. Across 1,000 worlds, rebel forces pressed their advantage, driving back the demoralized and disorganized Zorgon garrisons. Uprisings flared on planets that had never known a day of freedom, the hope kindled by the Prometheus spreading like wildfire. But the Zorgon elite, though reeling, clung to power with the desperate grip of a drowning man. In the hegemony's core systems, they lashed out with vicious reprisals, making examples of entire populations to cow the rest into submission. It was a time of chaos and upheaval, of desperate heroism and brutal atrocity. The rebels, united in purpose but disparate in culture and creed, struggled to forge a common path forward. Factions emerged, some advocating a policy of no mercy towards the Zorgon, others pleading for reconciliation and a measured transition of power. Without the singular threat of the hegemony to unite them, it seemed the fragile alliance might splinter and collapse. It was in this turbulent time that the legend of the Prometheus and her crew grew to almost mythic proportions. In the taverns and meeting halls of 100 worlds, tales were told of Captain Ixala's bravery, of the indomitable human spirit that had ignited the flames of rebellion. But it was more than just stories. The example set by the Prometheus had a tangible impact. Meetings of rebel leaders, once tinged with suspicion and old enmities, now invoked the memory of the fallen human heroes as a reminder of what they had sacrificed for the dream of a free galaxy. Slowly, painstakingly, a new order began to take shape. A council of races, each equal under the law, working together to dismantle the structures of Zorgon oppression and build a future of cooperation and mutual respect. It was not a perfect union. Old wounds and prejudices could not be erased overnight, but it was a start, a foundation upon which a lasting peace could be built. As the tide of liberation swept across the galaxy, the fate of the Zorgon became a point of fierce debate. Some called for their total extermination, a purging of the galaxy's greatest blight. Others, mindful of how close they had all come to succumbing to the cycle of violence, argued for a more measured approach. In the end, a compromise was struck. The Zorgon leadership, those who had perpetuated the systems of oppression and cruelty, were brought to stand trial before a galactic tribunal. But the Zorgon people, the countless civilians and conscripts who had lived under the yoke of the hegemony, were given a chance at redemption. Zorgon worlds were placed under the stewardship of the new Galactic Council, their resources and infrastructure harnessed not for conquest, but for rebuilding and restitution. Zorgon children were taught the truth of their history, the crimes of their forebears, and given the opportunity to forge a new path. It would be a long road, strewn with pitfalls and setbacks, but for the first time in living memory, the galaxy had hope. And through it all, the legend of the Prometheus endured. Though the ship itself was gone, destroyed in a blaze of defiant glory, its legacy lived on. Human ambassadors, once seen as curiosities from a backwater world, now found themselves welcomed as honored guests and trusted mediators. The story of the Prometheus, of the audacious few who had dared to challenge an empire, became a touchstone for a galaxy reborn. In the gleaming halls of the new galactic capital, A monument was raised to the fallen crew, a testament to their sacrifice and a reminder of the price of freedom. As for the Prometheus herself, rumors abounded. Some claimed to have seen a ghost ship flitting through the nebula of the Outer Rim, a phantom guardian watching over the fledgling New Order. Others whispered that the ship's plans had survived, passed from rebel group to rebel group, a promise that should the need arise, a new Prometheus could be built to defend the galaxy's freedom. But whether real or imagined, the impact of that one ship and her valiant crew could not be overstated. In a galaxy that had known only the cold, unyielding boot of oppression, they had rekindled the fire of hope. They had reminded the disparate peoples of the stars that unity was strength, that even the most invincible empire could be brought to its knees by the indomitable will of free beings. The galaxy would never be the same, and for that, it would be forever in the debt of one ship and the brave humans who crewed her. The Prometheus was gone, but her spirit, the spirit of defiance and courage in the face of overwhelming odds, would endure as long as there were those willing to stand up and fight for what was right. In the end, that was the true legacy of the Prometheus. Not a ship, but an idea that had changed the course of galactic history and would continue to inspire generations yet unborn. An idea as simple as it was powerful, that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope, as long as there were those brave enough to light the way.